The moment you stop explaining yourself, something subtle but powerful changes in the dynamic, not because you said anything dramatic, but because you didn't. You no longer rush to justify your intentions, smooth over every emotional ripple, or rescue the connection the moment tension appears. And that absence of urgency is felt immediately, especially by a woman who has grown used to being centered. When you over-explain, you communicate more than words. You communicate anxiety. You signal that being understood is more important to you than being grounded. But when you stop doing that, your energy shifts from seeking permission to standing in self-trust. You're no longer auditioning for her approval. You're simply existing in your own certainty. This is where her nervous system reacts. Not logically, but instinctively. Consistency used to mean you would clarify, reassure, and soften every moment of distance. When that pattern disappears, she doesn't feel relief, she feels risk, because access that once felt guaranteed now feels conditional. Not because you took something away, but because you stopped offering yourself prematurely. Women don't fear confidence. They fear unpredictability in access, and when you stop overfunctioning emotionally, you introduce a new variable, choice. She can no longer assume your emotional availability is automatic. She has to earn presence instead of expecting it. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about no longer shrinking your emotional posture to keep someone comfortable. When you trust yourself enough to stop explaining, you show that your inner world is stable, with or without validation. And that stability creates tension, not comfort, because comfort comes from predictability. Attraction comes from grounded self-possession. And the moment she senses that you are no longer centered around keeping the connection alive at all costs, she realizes something important has changed. You didn't pull away, you stood still. Most people misunderstand consistency. They think it's about fast replies, constant availability, or always being on. But true consistency isn't behavioral, it's emotional. It's the ability to remain stable regardless of someone else's fluctuations. You don't disappear to provoke anxiety. You don't overshow up to impress. You don't mirror her mood or chase her energy. Instead, you stay grounded. That's what makes it confusing in the best way. When you're emotionally consistent, your presence doesn't spike or vanish based on her reactions. You don't become warmer when she pulls back, and you don't become distant when she leans in. Your emotional posture remains the same, calm, busy, centered, and self-directed. This creates a unique form of tension because she can't regulate you through behavior. She can't pull reassurance out of you by withdrawing, and she can't control closeness by offering attention. Your presence is no longer reactive. It's chosen. And what cannot be controlled begins to feel valuable. This isn't manipulation, it's self-respect. Emotional stability sends a quiet but powerful message. I enjoy you, but I don't need to manage your emotions to feel okay. That level of groundedness is rare, and rarity creates gravity. She may not consciously understand why it affects her, but she feels it. The lack of emotional volatility removes the old leverage. She can't predict your responses based on her behavior anymore. And unpredictability, when paired with calmness, creates intrigue. You're not inconsistent, you're not distant. You're just no longer performing for approval. And that balance, being present without being dependent, is what shifts attraction from comfort to respect. Because when someone realizes they can't control your emotional availability, they begin to question their access. And questioning access is where value begins. When you stop initiating every emotional moment, silence begins to speak, not loudly, but clearly. This isn't cold silence or punishment. It's confident quiet, the kind that comes from inner fullness, not withdrawal. You're no longer filling every gap with reassurance. You're no longer checking in to manage the connection. You're allowing space to exist without anxiety, and in that space, her mind becomes active. Why isn't he checking? Why isn't he reacting? Why does he seem okay? This is where fear is created not by threats or ultimatums, but by the absence of need. You didn't say you were leaving. You didn't demand anything. You simply stopped signaling emotional dependence, and that's unsettling. Because when someone stops chasing connection, it suggests they already have one within themselves. Silence, when grounded, implies self-sufficiency, and self-sufficiency introduces uncertainty. If he's not leaning on me, how important am I now? She doesn't fear losing you because you might leave. She fears losing you because you're already standing on your own. This kind of silence doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't punish. It allows the other person to feel the absence of control. And control is often mistaken for connection. When you stop initiating emotional labor, you stop teaching her that closeness is your responsibility alone. She begins to notice her own effort or lack of it, and that awareness can be uncomfortable because silence forces reflection. And reflection is where power shifts. Here's the truth most people miss. A woman doesn't fear losing a man when he threatens to leave. She fears losing him when she sees his life moving forward without her validation. You grow, you focus. You choose peace over proving, and suddenly she notices she's no longer the mirror you check to see who you are. That's when something changes. You're not staying because you're attached. You're staying because you choose to. And choice is fragile. Choice can disappear. When your sense of identity isn't tied to her reactions, approval loses its leverage. She can't anchor you emotionally anymore. And while that might sound freeing, it's also destabilizing for someone who was used to being the emotional reference point. This isn't about dominance. It's about direction. A man with forward motion doesn't need permission to grow. He doesn't slow his life to maintain emotional comfort. He doesn't pause his evolution to stay relatable. And that forward momentum communicates something powerful. I'm not waiting. I'm moving with or without applause. That's when fear appears. Not panic, not drama, quiet fear, because she realizes your presence isn't guaranteed by history, attachment, or effort from the past. It's sustained only by present alignment, and alignment requires choice. The moment she understands that you're not emotionally anchored to her validation, she sees the truth. You're not afraid to lose her. You're capable of continuing without her, and that realization is far more powerful than any threat.